Have you ever thought about what it means to know your dark side? Perhaps you are here for a reason, guided by the universe to discover a deeper truth about yourself. Because the dark side is far more than just a vague concept from films and myths, it is an essential part of your own inner world. It rests within you, hidden and sometimes elusive, yet it influences the way you think, feel, and act in profound ways. In many cultures and traditions, the dark side has different faces. On an emotional level, it represents those parts of yourself that you would perhaps rather suppress: fear, anger, jealousy, insecurity. These are the deep emotions that often remain hidden and yet quietly guide your actions and decisions. Spiritually, the dark side can be seen as the part of you that retreats into the shadows when you shy away from the light of self-knowledge. It is the embodiment of the aspects of yourself that you may not want to see, but which are waiting to be accepted and integrated. Socially, the dark side is often what we try to hide because it doesn't conform to the expectations or norms placed on us from the outside. Pop culture has taken up the image of the dark side in many forms. In films such as Star Wars, the dark side is portrayed as a force that tempts people, promises them strength, but contributes to their downfall. But here, too, the dark side symbolizes the inner struggle with oneself, the inner conflicts that play out in all of us. It is not just an image of evil, but rather an expression of the unknown, those parts of yourself that you do not yet fully know or perhaps even fear. But the truth is, each of us has a dark side. No one is free from shadows, unresolved inner conflicts or hidden fears. But instead of fighting or repressing them, the real challenge is to understand and accept this dark side. Carl Jung, one of the most important psychologists of the 20th century, once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by becoming aware of the darkness." Jung is talking here about the deep need to recognize and embrace one's own shadows and integrate them into one's own self. Only by accepting this dark side can we find true wholeness. Now we come to the question of how this dark side arose in you and how you can influence it. In the next chapter, we will delve deeper into the psychology of the shadow and examine how inner conflicts and repressed emotions shape your life. Are you ready to take a step further into this hidden world? There is a part of every human being that often goes unnoticed, that retreats into the shadows and yet profoundly influences our behavior, our decisions, and even our self-image. Psychology calls this part the shadow. The term, coined by the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, describes all those aspects of our personality that we reject, repress, or deny for various reasons. They belong to us, but we have banished them to the dark. The dark side of you is not inherently bad. Rather, it is the result of what you have not fully accepted or processed. It is your unresolved conflicts, your repressed emotions and fears that accumulate in the shadows. Everyone carries these shadow parts within them, and the more they are ignored, the stronger they work in the subconscious. These unconscious parts often control our reactions to certain situations or people without us realizing it. Imagine that in a moment of anger you overreact to a seemingly harmless comment. The trigger may seem small, but the shadow is working in the background. Anger is an example of an emotion that many people don't like to recognize in themselves. It is often seen as inappropriate or destructive and is therefore suppressed. But this repressed anger finds its way to the surface, perhaps in the form of a sudden emotional explosion or as an underlying irritability that influences your behavior without you realizing it. The shadow also shows itself in your inner conflicts. Perhaps there are parts of your personality that you reject because they don't fit in with the image you have of yourself. For example, if you see yourself as calm and composed, it could be that you suppress all parts of yourself that are impulsive or passionate. However, these parts do not simply disappear. They remain in your shadow and continue to work there until you bring them into the light and accept them. Repressing these parts has a price. The longer you ignore your dark side, the more it can influence your behavior and decisions. This doesn't mean that you have to defeat your dark side, it's more about recognizing it, accepting it, and integrating it into your life. After all, the dark side often harbors strength and potential that can only be unleashed when you embrace it. An example from psychology shows how powerful the shadow can be. People who try to appear positive and friendly at all times may suppress the negative or aggressive parts of their personality so much that they eventually come to light in the form of uncontrolled outbursts. These people are often surprised by the intensity of their anger or sadness because they believe that such feelings don't belong to them. However, these emotions belong to everyone, and only by consciously dealing with them can they be channeled into constructive channels. Now that you have gained an initial insight into the psychology of the shadow, in the next chapter we will explore how the dark side of your emotions, particularly anger, fear, and pain, affect you. These emotions are often the key to understanding what you have repressed into the shadow. Anger, fear, and pain are the strongest expressions of the dark side of our emotions. These feelings are often the first ones we want to repress or control because they are unpleasant or make us vulnerable. However, it is precisely these repressed emotions that have the strongest hidden effect and guide our behavior. Anger, for example, is an emotion that is often seen as negative. Many people try to suppress it, but in doing so it builds up and often finds uncontrolled outlets, be it through sudden outbursts or subtle, passive-aggressive behavior. If anger is not consciously processed, it becomes a dark force that influences life unnoticed. The situation is similar with fear. Fear often hides behind facades of strength or control. But unresolved fear can paralyze us, make us avoid making decisions and hinder our growth. It keeps us trapped in our comfort zone without us realizing it. Pain, on the other hand, is often the deepest of these feelings. Emotional pain can build up a defense mechanism in us that alienates us from ourselves and others. If we don't allow it and live through it, it remains as a constant background melody in our lives, influencing all our actions and relationships. In the next chapter, we will look at how these dark emotions are not only a threat, but also hold potential for transformation. Let me know if the scope is right for you and we'll go from there. The dark side is often seen as something we should fear or avoid. But in truth, it harbors an unsuspected power that, when understood and integrated, can transform our lives. Darkness, symbolically speaking, is not only negative, it is also the space from which light can emerge. Without darkness, there would be no contrast, no way to truly appreciate the light. Many myths and stories show time and again that it is often the confrontation with darkness that allows heroes to grow. They have to go through the darkest moments to find their true strength. It's the same in real life. Crises, inner conflicts, and recognizing our own shadow side push us to our limits, and that is exactly where the potential for growth lies. Darkness forces us to recognize ourselves in a deeper, more honest way. It challenges us to accept our weaknesses and leads us to deep transformation. Without these challenges, we would remain in our comfort zone and never discover the power that lies dormant within us. In the next chapter, we will look at how we can consciously deal with the dark side and which strategies help us to utilize this power in a positive way. Recognizing the dark side is only the first step. But what comes next? How can you learn to deal with these hidden parts of yourself instead of suppressing them? The art lies in integrating your shadow side, accepting it as part of your personality and drawing strength from it. One of the most effective methods of dealing with the dark side is self-reflection. This means consciously confronting your fears, your weaknesses, and the emotions that you would normally avoid. Meditation and mindfulness are valuable tools here. They help you to enter a state of inner calm in which you can observe your thoughts and feelings without immediately judging or rejecting them. In the silence of meditation, you slowly become aware of your unconscious patterns and repressed emotions. This clarity is the key to recognizing the dark parts of yourself. Journaling, or writing down your thoughts and feelings, is another powerful technique. By writing down your inner experiences on a daily basis, you can recognize patterns that would otherwise remain hidden. If you regularly write down your thoughts, you will notice which themes keep coming up, perhaps anger, fear of failure, or deep insecurities. This sorting out of your thoughts brings light into the darkness and helps you to better understand and accept them. Another valuable approach is so-called shadow work, as described by Carl Jung. Shadow work encourages you to face the repressed aspects of your personality, consciously reflect on them, and ultimately integrate them. Instead of seeing them as enemies, you learn to accept them as parts of yourself. Everyone carries these shadow parts within them, and only when you bring them into the light can they lose their destructive power and even give you new energy and strength. Forgiveness also plays a central role in integrating the dark side. We often harbor resentment towards ourselves or other people, anger, guilt, the feeling of having failed. These negative emotions feed the dark side and keep us trapped. Forgiveness is a powerful act that allows us to let go and find healing. When you forgive yourself and others, you create space for growth and transformation. However, it is important to understand that the dark side cannot be defeated. It is a constant companion that will accompany you throughout your life. But instead of running away from it or suppressing it, you can learn to work with it. By consciously accepting your dark parts, you become more resilient and can channel this energy into positive channels. In the next chapter, we will take a closer look at how the dark side comes out in our interpersonal relationships and which strategies help to break through negative relationship patterns. The dark side doesn't just show up inside us, but also in our relationships with other people. The people we interact with often reflect the parts of ourselves that we don't want to see, our insecurities, fears, and deep emotional wounds. These dark aspects are particularly strong in close emotional relationships, partnerships, friendships, and family relationships. This is where conflicts, power games, and destructive behavior patterns can unfold, which are often born out of our own repressed darkness. One example of this is power struggles in relationships. When you feel insecure or weak, you may tend to exert control over your partner or those around you to compensate for this insecurity. This control can take the form of jealousy, emotional manipulation, or dominance. Often used unconsciously, such power games feed the dark side of the relationship and lead to conflict, mistrust, and emotional distance. Sometimes it is also projections that occur in relationships, where you transfer your own unresolved conflicts and fears onto your partner. You may recognize qualities in the other person that you don't like about yourself and judge them. An example would be if you are afraid of rejection yourself, but project this fear onto your partner by accusing them of mistrust or emotional coldness. Such projections are a classic expression of the dark side of relationships. Communication is often the first key to overcoming these dynamics. By recognizing your own dark parts and sharing them openly and honestly with your partner or friend, you break the cycle of repressed emotions and power plays. When both partners are willing to face their own shadows, it can lead to a deeper, more authentic connection. Instead of avoiding or suppressing conflict, the dark side in relationships can be used as a source of transformation that allows for deeper understanding and genuine closeness. Another helpful approach is mindfulness in conflict. Instead of reacting impulsively to hurtful comments or behavior, it helps to pause and reflect. Where is my reaction coming from? What deeper emotion or fear is being touched here? By being mindful of your emotions, you can break the cycle of reaction and counterreaction and bring a new level of awareness to your relationships. If both partners are willing to deal honestly with their own shadow sides, relationships can become a space for healing and growth. But this requires courage, openness, and a willingness to really see yourself and the other person, in all their darkness and lightness. In the next chapter, we will look at the dark side in a broader social context. How does the dark side express itself on a collective level, in social structures and in the way we deal with power and control? The dark side not only manifests itself in our personal relationships, but also on the larger stage of society. In political, economic, and social structures, it often works through mechanisms based on fear, manipulation, and control. If you take a closer look, you realize how the dark forces of our human nature, greed, the desire for power and fear of loss, are deeply rooted in the structures of society. One example is media manipulation. In a world where information is available 24/7, fear is often used as a tool to direct and control people. Sensationalism and negative news attract our attention because the human mind instinctively reacts to threats. This targeted manipulation of the mass media uses our deepest fears, fear of the unknown, of change, of loss, to shape opinions and influence behavior. This creates tensions and divisions in society based on fear and insecurity. The dark side is also evident in political and economic systems, where power and control are often concentrated in the hands of a few. Systems based on inequality foster a sense of powerlessness in those who have less influence. This inequality reinforces the shadow in society. Those who feel powerless react with fear, anger, or resignation. This is the perfect breeding ground for the dark side of protest movements, abuse of power, and social division. Another area in which the dark side of society becomes visible is the fear of being different. Discrimination, prejudice, and adherence to rigid social norms are an expression of this collective dark side. When entire groups of people are marginalized because of their skin color, gender, or religion, this is often a projection of society's own unresolved fears and insecurities as a whole. It is easier to fear the other than to deal with one's own inner conflicts. But just as on an individual level, confronting the dark side can also lead to social change and healing. Movements for social justice, equality, and freedom often arise from recognizing these injustices. They show that the first step to healing is to recognize the darkness and consciously take countermeasures. It is in your power not to be influenced by fear and manipulation. Conscious media consumption, critical thinking, and the courage to question social norms are key to arming yourself against the dark structures of society. If you become aware of these mechanisms, you can decide for yourself what influence they are allowed to have on you. In the next and final chapter, we will bring together the balance between light and dark and discuss how you can lead a more balanced and fulfilling life by accepting your own dark side. After diving deep into the different facets of the dark side, in ourselves, in our relationships, and in society, one thing will become clear: the dark side is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a part of you, a natural and necessary counterpart to the light. True growth and inner healing can only take place if you learn to integrate both sides instead of suppressing one. The darkness within you harbors enormous power. It is not only the place where your fears, insecurities, and deepest emotions reside, but also the space where transformation and personal growth happen. Without darkness, there would be no light. Just as day cannot exist without night, your inner light needs darkness to grow, unfold, and gain depth. Finding the balance between light and darkness means realizing that both sides exist within you, and that it is your responsibility to keep them in harmony. This does not mean ignoring or suppressing your shadow side, but embracing, exploring and integrating it. Only when you accept the darkness within you will you reduce its control over you. It loses its power to influence you in secret and instead becomes a source of strength, creativity and self-knowledge. Striving for this balance requires mindfulness and self-reflection. It means regularly questioning yourself, confronting your deepest fears and breaking through emotional patterns that no longer serve you. It is an ongoing process, a constant dance between light and darkness that affects your entire life. There are many ways to encourage this balance: meditation, shadow work, therapy, or spiritual practices that help you get in touch with your inner self. By dedicating yourself to this work, you will develop a deeper understanding of yourself over time. You will realize that the darkness within you is just as valuable as the light. It is the place where you let go of your fears, find your strength and discover your true self. In a world that often only glorifies the light and sees the darkness as a weakness, your true strength lies in accepting both. You are both light and shadow, and these two poles make you the complete, complex being that you are. By learning to live with and appreciate this duality, you will not only grow within yourself, but also in your interactions with other people and the world around you. Your journey doesn't end here, it has only just begun. Finding the balance between light and darkness is a lifelong task. But with each step along the way, you will find more wholeness, more peace, and a deeper connection to yourself. You are ready. Ready to embrace the darkness and discover the light within.